It was recently brought to my attention that we haven't done many Ranger Monk builds, which is a huge travesty. That's an awesome multi-class, so I figured I might do a little mini-series where I do a couple of those builds, the ones I really like. This is one of those builds. This video is brought to you by the amazing clothing line from Obvious Mimic. I love these shirts. These shirts are awesome. I have a bunch of them. They are high quality, they have awesome artwork, and I like the jokes behind them. It kind of has a humorous feel where you have shirts like Mind Flayer Hypnotherapy. I mean, we all struggle with mental health after all, so why not let a Mind Flayer help you out? If you want to try some out yourself, you can find a link in the description down below. Enjoy. Let's jump into the concept for this build. I want to be mixing Swarmkeeper with Way of the Open Hand Monk. The reason why is both of them have an emphasis in forced movement. So we're going to be doing a forced movement build capitalizing on dealing a bunch of damage to our enemies, and I think we have an awesome flavor to accompany it. So let's jump in. Let's begin with our lineage. I think this is a great opportunity to take Aarakocra. Since Monsters of the Multiverse, Aarakocra has largely fallen off compared to Owlin or Fairy, who also have a flying speed, but Owlin comes with dark vision and Fairy comes with better spells. But here we have a niche. Aarakocra get bonus damage to their unarmed strikes. They get to do D6 damage instead of our normal Monk D4, which means we don't have to invest in Monk as much and in the early game, and we're still doing more damage as if we were a level 5 Monk. I think that's a great option to take here, although you could still take Fairy or Owlin and do okay. The main thing is we need to be able to fly with this build. As for our stats, we're going to be going Wisdom primary, Dexterity secondary, Constitution tertiary, normal Monk stats for the Wisdom side. So let's jump into the level by level breakdown. Level 1, we're going to be going into Ranger. You're going to be a standard normal Ranger, and there's not much to say about this level. You're going to be a standard Ranger. You can be doing things at range or you can be doing them up close. It really doesn't matter at this point, just survive. Level 2, we get our fighting style. We're going to be taking the Druidic Warrior fighting style, and we're going to be picking up Shillelagh and Thorn Whip. This allows us to continue being a melee combatant, but be able to use our Wisdom modifier instead of our Dexterity modifier happily. Considering that's going to be our primary investment, this is going to come in clutch. As for Thorn Whip, it has a lot of flexibility because it's a melee attack at 30 feet, so if we knock an enemy prone, we can still have advantage at 30 feet. But additionally, since we are a forced movement build, Thorn Whip gives us that extra forced movement at a distance. Can be very good. Level 3, we're going Swarmkeeper. At this point, we're probably going to be mostly just doing the extra damage that Swarmkeeper gives us, but if an opportunity presents itself, we can do that forced movement to do some incredible things like throw them off a cliff. Level 4, we get an ASI, which we're going to be putting into Wisdom. If we're lucky enough to have an odd Wisdom, we get a half feat, which I'm going to recommend Fey Touched. Not only do we get the amazing Misty Step, but we can also get an additional first level spell. There's a couple of great options for us. The first one I'm taking a look at is Gift of Alacrity. Us going first is going to be a huge deal because we are going to be a battlefield controller very consistently, and getting that off earlier as opposed to later lets our allies work with it, and it makes it more difficult for our enemies to move around. It sets us up for success. So I think Gift of Alacrity is a sleeper pick. I think it's very powerful. However, we could also just take a free Hunter's Mark. We have the common Hunter's Mark plus Flurry of Blows combo, and being able to have a free Hunter's Mark is nice, although it's going to compete with our concentration, which is going to be our main tactic, so we might not want to take that one. Another option is Dissonant Whispers. It's more forced movement, and we can push enemies into bad situations using their reaction. Another idea is Silvery Barbs. I probably won't be going to level 5 in Monk in this build, but there are builds you could, and if you were to do so, then you get the Stunning Strike plus Silvery Barbs combo, which can be pretty powerful, especially when we're investing in Wisdom. So that's something else to consider if you want to do a variation on this build. But for me, I think Gift of Alacrity stands out in particular. Level 5 is a big level for us. Not only do we get extra attack, we also get second level spells as a Ranger, the most important of which is going to be Spike Growth. This is going to be core to our whole strategy. However, we also get Web. Web's an incredible spell, and everything we do with Spike Growth, we can also do with Web if we're wanting to do a more control and less damage-based strategy for this particular fight. And here we're going to get our main tactic. We're going to start the combat out by doing a Spike Growth as an inconvenient place as our enemies can possibly have. We're able to fly above the Spike Growth, go in there, beat the crap out of our enemies, force them to move, which is going to do a bunch of extra damage. The whole idea is we're kind of like a prison guard. We create a prison, whether it be a Web or Spike Growth, and then we take our enemies from the outskirts and push them towards the middle. They're in the middle, they have to use their movement to get out, and it's going to do a ton of extra damage, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're like the prison guard here. This is a fun moment to talk about some visualization with this build. So we are a Monk Ranger, and we're an Aarakocra. I like the idea of us being, you know, we're a bird person with this awesome fighting style, hand-to-hand combat strategy with the bow staff that we're using shillelagh. So what's our swarm? Well, I like the idea of our swarm being our feathers swarming around us, and we use our feathers in combat. So for example, when we cast Spike Growth, our feathers go and plant themselves in the ground, creating a field of these sharp feathers, which we can fly over and our enemies cannot. From there, we can use our feathers to push them around in our Spike Growth and punch them around and beat the crap out of them. I think it's a really cool flavor. Something to mention here is we have Thorn Whip plus our forced movement from the swarm, and they can work together, and it creates a bunch of really weird dynamics where we can pull an enemy in and then it pushes them away with our feathers, or we can super pull an enemy in. All sorts of things we can do. Main idea, get them towards the center of our Thorn Growth. At level 6, we're going to jump into Monk. We're going to take off our armor at this point and have our unarmored armor, which should be fairly decent with an investment in wisdom and dexterity. We're also going to get martial arts, which is going to give us those bonus action attacks, which are just nice to throw on, especially because ours are a d6. Level 2, we're going to get Ki, which we're mainly going to use for Flurry of Blows just to get a bit of extra damage. It's nice with Hunter's Mark if we're doing these smaller combats. You can do a Hunter's Mark Flurry of Blows combo instead of doing a big Spike Growth and investing our few second level spells. We're also going to get unarmored movement, and movement is really important with this build because we need to fly around our prison really quickly and push enemies back in. Level 8's another big level for us because we get level 3 in Monk and we get Way of the Open Hand. Way of the Open Hand, whenever we use Flurry of Blows, we can do an additional thing along with it. The most important one for our purposes is to push enemies using our punches. So this way we can do 3 different saves per turn. We can do our save against our swarm, and then we can do 2 punches that each push enemies. So we can take multiple enemies and throw them into the Spike Growth, keeping them towards the center, or we can take one enemy and just move them back and forth, and just grind the absolute crap out of them, shred them to pieces. Level 9, Monk 4, we're going to get an ASI bump. Now, the idea here is ideally we want to max out wisdom and then max out dexterity, but there is a caveat. We may be struggling with our concentration, and we need our concentration to be fantastic. So this might be a moment where we take Resilient Constitution or Warcaster if we want to try and buffer, or if we've been having issues with our concentration checks. If you happen to have an odd dexterity and you have the capacity to be able to increase it without being terrible in concentration checks, then I suggest picking up the Skill Expert feat. You're going to get that half feat, but then you're also going to get Expertise in Athletics, so we can kind of minor as a grappler that we can drag people using our great movement speed through the thorns. Just gives us another option that we can play with. Level 10, we go back into Ranger to get a bit more movement speed. As I've said, movement speed is great with this build. From here, we're going to continue going into Ranger, mostly to continue expanding the amount of Spike Growths that we get. But it also comes with some nice utility like bonus action invisibility and things along those lines. It's a fairly simple build, but I think it'll be pretty effective. Just doing a Spike Growth at the beginning of combat is going to set up our enemies to have reduced movement, and they're going to be taking a bunch of extra damage, and it's going to set up our team to do any forced movement combinations they want. We can do our own, but this really enables a whole team to capitalize on it as well. I also really like the flavor of a swarm being our feathers floating around us. I think it's a really cool visual combined with this Monk mixed martial artist fighter, Aarakocra person. I don't know. I think it's pretty neat. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. But with that, I hope you have yourselves an incredible day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.